What is up, guys? Ivan here with getivan.com, and in this video we're going to be going through the process of setting up your own static site hosting using Microsoft Azure and Cloudflare as a CDN and DNS provider. So I've got a series of tabs open here. You're going to need to have these tabs open to do this. You're going to need a tab open with your domain name registrar. You're going to need Cloudflare. You're going to need a Microsoft Azure account, and you're also going to need to download something like CyberDuck, which will allow you to connect to your object storage in Azure very easily. So let's get started with the domain name registrar. Navigate to your domain name. In this case, I'm using largify.com as an example. And then when you go to edit the settings of your domain name, you should find something called the name servers, or add custom name servers, or edit name servers, or something like that. In that area, you're going to put the name servers for Cloudflare. Okay. And those name servers are brett.ns.cloudflare.com and ns.cloudflare.com. If you're concerned about those and you want to ensure that you're pasting them, then let's go through the domain add process. So if I added something like Largify, I already have this added, so I'm just using this as an example. You go to Cloudflare, you go to add a new site or add a site up here, then you go type your domain name in, click. Oh, it's not a registered domain name. Okay. Give me 1 second. It won't let me do this again. Give me a moment. I have this one, pyre.us. So we'll add that. Taking a while there. Then just select the free plan, confirm that plan. It'll scan for your DNS records, and if you need to transfer them over, obviously you can do that, but I tend to just, click continue, not mess with this in the creation process. And then continue with default method. And this is the point when it asks you to then, add the name servers. So remove old name servers, add the new ones. So you can copy paste these into this area and then obviously submit. It might take a few minutes, so it can take, I don't know, 5 to 15 minutes or something for your DNS stuff to propagate properly, particularly your name servers. Once that's finished, then basically it'll look something like this. You'll be in the overview section. You'll want to click on the DNS tab, and then it'll bring you to this area. So let's go ahead and go. We'll deal with the DNS stuff in a bit. I've already got this in here. I use this as an example in my GCP Cloudflare hosting static site hosting video. So let's go to Azure. Now, when you go to all services, you'll see storage accounts right here. So you'll click on that and add a resource. It'll bring you to this page. So on this page, you'll add whatever your subscription is, your resource group, for example, is storage. And then go to under storage account name. I tend to name it something that is just like the domain name. So in this case, it would be, largify.com. I don't have this in here yet, so you can't add a dot. So I just do something like largify.com. Or if the brand name is really unique, then I'll just do it as that one particular word. So Largify, in this case, US Central, standard performance, and then account kind needs to be general purpose version 2. So it has to be storage version 2. That's the only one that supports static site deployment. And then under replication, the cheapest is LRS, locally redundant storage. And then it gets more expensive from there. So it's like 3 cents a gig on LRS, and then it's 4 cents a gig on ZRS, and so on and so forth. And these are basically just redundancies for if certain nodes within particular zones are are down, and it does happen. Like I've seen certain parts of Microsoft service being temporarily down or whatever, but I don't know. I doubt that it would affect it in a significant way. I've been doing ZRS just kind of out of paranoia, but LRS is probably fine. And since the files are served to the CDN, and they're like, unless they're being changed a lot, then the CDN is not going to change whatever a page has based on whatever the bucket might have, if even if there's something an issue with the storage in any particular moment. So LRS is probably fine, but you're welcome to do something a little more redundant if you're not concerned about the cost. So a brief note here, after you finish that, you can click on data protection. There is this feature called Blobs soft delete and file share soft delete. So if you have an agency where people are accessing your files a lot and you're concerned about security risks, you could enable these to be able to recover files that are deleted. I have mine set up to have redundancies at the in the cloud storage area, so there's backups being made all the time. So that's kind of how I'm dealing with it. But I just wanted to make a note of this, and if you're interested, the rest of it is not really relevant. You can just click review and create, and it'll take a minute to actually create the bucket. So let's give a head to that. So deployment complete, and from here you can just navigate back to home and storage and then find the service. Once you click on your storage account, then basically the pertinent areas are going to be your access keys, the static website tab, and then the custom domain. Everything else is not really relevant. So let's just dive in, and first of all, let's activate the static website. You can do this in any order. I mean, as long as it gets done, So let's enable the static website. I'm going to put my file names in here. So index.html and 404.html. That's the index and the error path document, and save this. So basically, this site is now capable of being deployed static from the bucket. And we need to set up the custom domain. So we'll go ahead and do this first. You have to follow these instructions and create two CNames. You have to create a verification CName, and then you have to create the CName that will actually go to the website and serve the website from your custom domain. So the first one is the as verify, and basically you need to copy this as verify.www as a name for a record. So we're going to go ahead and go over to the settings, and I'm going to delete some of these records right now so that this doesn't become a problem. So I'm going to add a record. I'm going to go to Cname. I'm going to paste what we just copied there, the as verify.www. The target is going to be this right here. So I always use the web core version. Very long story behind that. They're not really the same. They give you them as being the same, but they're not really the same. Even when you set up the static site, they give you this one in particular. So it's okay to connect to the storage through the blob core. But I've actually had problems trying to use this blob core string in DNS and other capacities. And they have different characteristics. They don't tell you that, but I'm fairly certain they do. So I would use the web core one for your DNS. So go ahead and paste that here and make sure it's the as verified, and then it's got the rest of it. So, oh, by the way, this cannot be proxied. So this has to be DNS only. Otherwise, it won't be able to verify. It's a huge pain. It took me forever to figure out what the problem was when I couldn't get verification to work when I first started using this method. So, okay. So that's good to go. And now we need to add the actual bucket or whatever. So we're going to copy this web core string. And I recommend doing it on www. So I recommend the subdomain. There's I guess a debate on what to use. If you want to use the root, you'll do an @ symbol here. If you want to use www, then you obviously put it here and then paste that string in. Make sure it's this is proxied, and then click save. So why did it give us an error? Oh, the a name record. Okay, so in the previous thing I did, I pointed the www to the internal Cloudflare IP. So we'll talk about this later. I'll explain this in a moment here. So let's save this. Now, if you want to use the root, Cloudflare does come with Cname flattening, as you can see down here. So you have the ability to use the root with a static site, but you're technically not supposed to. That's technically a hack of sorts, and it's supported by higher end DNS providers. And I have to use it on some things, but for all new assets, I'm actually choosing to use the subdomain, the www. That's a very long story, like a whole other video, but I do recommend using it, obviously for new assets and assets where you don't have to deal with redirects and all that stuff. So with old, redirecting old content. Anyways, so this is good to go. Let's actually add our content now. Or actually, let's verify this first. So www.largify.com, and then we're going to click use indirect Cname validation. It might not have been enough time for this to propagate, but we're going to click save. Yep, and it's successful. This thing is the hardest part about this whole process, is getting this to be successful, because sometimes it can take forever for this to propagate for some reason. So as long as your name servers have updated, it should be fast. Okay, so that's good. Let's go add our site's content. So you got to download CyberDuck or something that is an equivalent that can connect to, your Azure bucket. So we got it going on here. I'm going to open it up. You'll right-click to add a new bookmark, and then that will open up a screen that looks like this. You'll do the drop down to the Windows Azure blob storage. And this is where we need to kind of add some other information that we find under access keys. So I'm going to refresh these in a bit. So, there's no security issue here. But under storage account name, I'm going to copy this. It's obviously Largify. I'm going to paste it here. And in some cases in the nickname, I'll do the domain, the fully qualified domain name. Under storage account name, I'm going to paste it here. Under server, you've got to replace this thing before Blob Core, and it's okay to use Blob Core here, by the way. And you got so that it's like this. You see, so that it's the actual subdomain of your storage account name. A quick note here: there was an update on CyberDuck recently, and every time I type in this storage account area, CyberDuck will crash. So I recommend only pasting in this area. I don't know, maybe it's a temporary issue, but just a quick disclaimer there. Now we need to grab our access key, so I'm just going to copy this key here and paste it here. Now you want to do this last, because if you do it before you put any of this stuff, then CyberDuck views it as a different record. And so it'll delete your primary access key from being saved with it. You have to keep adding it, though. Do it last. Anywho, the path should be / $, and then web. Once you enable static, this $ web is the container of your static site being served from the bucket. So this is the correct path. And then you'll be finished. You can basically X this out and it saves. So you can double click at that point and it should connect. If you get an error, then you configured it improperly. Just go back over and make sure you did it right. There's no typo or whatever. You didn't accidentally delete a period or something. So as you can see, it's blank. and there were no errors, so that means we're actually looking at the bucket. I'm going to grab my coming soon files. I'm just going to drag them, and it should just take a couple seconds. It's finished. I'm going to close this, minimize this. Now, we did everything. I think we did everything. We enabled the static site. We set up the DNS records. We set up the custom domain, and we loaded the files. I didn't talk about the internal IP and the page rules, so let's talk about that before we test the site. So you always have to set up an internal IP on either your subdomain or your root, depending on which one you want your site to serve. So I'm serving my subdomain, which means I want an A record on the root that's pointing to the internal IP of Cloudflare, which is 192.0.2.1. So with all assets that I have in Cloudflare, I use this internal IP. And I would write this down because it took me they don't give this to you in the back end. I had to like search through their frequently asked questions just to find this number here, which is, I think, an oversight. Just a moment. An ant. So you want to do that, and obviously point the opposing thing that you're not using to this A record, and make sure it's proxied. And what this allows you to do is to set a page rule so that you can redirect. This is the biggest weakness of Cloudflare. They are super stingy with redirects, and so you don't want to use Cloudflare if you have a site. You don't want to use Cloudflare as a CDN if you have a site that requires a lot of redirects. And I'm going to be doing a video after this one talking about my recommendation for a CDN that can handle a lot of redirects in a cost-effective way. So that's coming soon. Anyways, go to page rules, and then this is where you'll set up a rule. And let me do it from start to finish so I can kind of show you here. Let me actually kill this here, and then we'll do it from the beginning. So what it matches obviously is going to determine what you're doing. I'm doing from the subdomain, so I'm just going to go if the URL matches the root, so largify.com/*. Then I want you to redirect it to the subdomain. But you can also do something with wildcards like this, *largify.com/*, and this will redirect all of your subdomains to your root, for example. But I don't really want to do that. I want to just do it from the root. I'm going to pick a setting, scroll down to forwarding URL, select status 301 permanent redirect, and the destination, it needs to be a fully qualified URL. So https://www.largify.com/money symbol $1, the number 1. So that $1 refers to the sequence of asterisks in your string. So if you had 4 asterisks, it would be $1, $2, $3, and so on and so forth. So if you were doing something like this right here, *largify.com/money symbol, then you wanted to redirect all subdomains to www, then you would do something like this, www.largify.com/$2, and this would redirect all of those to, this would redirect all of these to the www, and then all of the trailing slash would be redirected to the same place, basically, on the www. So it gets a little confusing maybe to some and complicated. You could even do, you could do it to the root, but anyways, I just wanted to explain that because knowing how that works can save you a lot of suffering. Let's save and deploy this. So this is good to go. So that's how the redirects work. You only get 3 for free, and so you have to be real creative with those wildcards. So let's go over to our browser here, and let's test it. Largify.com. Boom, we typed in the root, and we got redirected to the subdomain. So let's type in the root, and so that obviously it's being served, it's working. I know that was a little bit too simple to be grasped, at the fact that it's it's working. So we'll go to largify.com / and then we'll enter a bunch of random characters to test the 404 page. Oh, something crazy happened there. Never seen that happen before. Let's try that again. Largify.com / a bunch of characters. There it goes. I don't know what that was. It was like some spam or something. Never seen that happen before. Anywho, so when we look at the domain name, we see www.largify.com. So it redirected from the root. We entered in an incorrect URL, and it redirected to the subdomain, and then it served a 404 page. So it works. So here's a brief recap of the process. You change your name. I guess you add a new domain name in Cloudflare. It would be the first step. And then it'll give you the Cloudflare name servers. You go to your domain registrar and change the name servers for the domain to Cloudflare. After a few minutes of DNS propagation, you'll be able to come in and start modifying your records and what have you. Then you'll go and you'll set up your Microsoft Azure bucket. And then once you are in your bucket, you'll set up the static site tab, make sure that's enabled, give it the documents that you want to use in your container. You can also go to your custom domain section after that. Make sure you set up the domain that you want. And this is the point when you'll change the DNS settings for the under Cloudflare for the domain. And then after that, you can add your files using something like CyberDuck, and tie up those odd ends, depending on the order of how you're doing things. But that's basically it. It probably takes. I've timed it at both GCP and Azure so far at being roughly 13 minutes or so 10 minutes to maybe 12 minutes. If you're just going and not talking like me, it can go faster. The benefit of using Azure and Cloudflare is it's easy to do. Azure is better than GCP because GCP publicly enumerates the files. So there are ways for people to look at a storage container and then enumerate the files in your Google Cloud Storage. So your GCE or GCS bucket or whatever. There might be a way to specially configure user permissions so that doesn't happen. But from what I understand, that's one of the issues with using GCS. But with Azure, the buckets are configured differently, and so they're more private. And it's pretty easy to do it with Azure, and you don't have to go through the process of, like on GCS, you have to verify using Search Console. So there's this other level of verification, whereas with Azure, you just have to you do a DNS record. So to me, it's a little bit faster. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit more private and easier to do. The downside is that another downside though to that is that when you're looking at it in CyberDuck, each bucket is its own entity, so each bucket has to be set up independently, whereas GCS actually is, once you configure it's at the account level. So once you add your GCS account to CyberDuck, you can then manipulate all of your assets inside of that container. So that's a little bit better from a management standpoint. But I still prefer Azure right now, and I've had some problems getting GCS to work with CyberDuck recently. So and then of course the overall benefit of using an independent object storage with Cloudflare is the fact that with Cloudflare, you get higher security, and you get no bandwidth cost. Unlimited bandwidth it doesn't cost anything. It's zero. So this is what I'm using right now, building some bigger sites, like some mass page sites, and I'm developing a mass page static method right now. So anywho, that's basically it. Check out the videos after this one. I'm going to be sharing my recommended CDN if you need to do a lot of redirects and these page rules, so these edge rules, right? Then I'm going to be talking about my recommended CDN provided for that, because you can't use Cloudflare if you need those special edge rules. But thanks for watching, guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to catching you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.